Right, that's it. We're live. Don't know how many people are going to watch this. Say hello in the comments. My laptop's over here, so we'll keep looking over to see who's watching. Just got a bit of a throat lozenge because I keep getting a sore throat when I'm doing these, so I thought I'd just help myself out. Got a different camera angle. This is the new camera angle for when I'm recording, so hopefully you'll enjoy this. I'm going to be taking the wheels off first. I was going to actually have to fabricate standoffs, but the post woman brought my post, so I have some fresh standoffs here, so that will save some time. We might even use those standoffs if they're the right length. They might be a bit too long. We could even use them as links, so that's quite cool. So I might save that for later on, show people how to do that. Gonna get the wheels off to start with and then get it on the worktop. So let's get our drill going and off we go. Hopefully you're all having a fantastic weekend. I'm certainly having a pretty good weekend. Went to a new location today to do some driving. Ended up not filming at all, so there's no Saturday night video, unfortunately, hence the live stream. And had an absolutely awesome time. It was a location that I wasn't actually expecting to be that good, that amazing, but turned out to be pretty awesome. It was mostly trail, lots of hill climbs, but there were loads and loads and loads of rocks because there was a crag there that had, over several hundred, maybe even 1,000 years, been dumping rocks into the woods, and they'd accumulated, and there were lots of like really sort of mossy, muddy little trails and tracks through. Some of it was quite hard for the G500. Some of it was just out and out fun, to be honest. Oh, 3D printed stands by Sam Dare. Really like them. He's called Dare to Print on Instagram. Got a review on the channel. Really like them. Really tough. Do everything that you'd expect from a stand. I've actually got a 3D printer coming next week, and I've got some interesting plans for the channel for that. So if you're not subscribed, then maybe subscribe and find out. So what we're doing today is installing this, which is a servo on axle mount. Now the Scattergun comes with a 3-link and panhard setup, and that's absolutely fantastic because it's designed as a class 2 competition rail, so you get all your scale points and everything else. However, because I use it for quite daft hardcore crawling, I'm going to swap it to a servo on axle mount to get a bit more precision, but also try and drop the truck down. Now, when this thing is settled on the links, I can just about get I can get my hand underneath. I can just get my knuckles underneath, so it's super low. Some people tend to build them where they can get about 2 fingers underneath when it's on the bench, but I've got mine even lower. I'm intending to go so low that when it's on the bench, the belly is touching the bench. That means that the belly is starting to get lower than the wheel bolts, where you bolt on your wheels. And the reason for that is it's going to drop the centre of gravity by however tall my tiny hands are. I really don't have very big hands, but probably about another inch off the centre of gravity, and take the weight of the servo and put the weight of the servo on top of the axle, and that will have a huge effect. Now my connection seems pretty good, so I'm going to try and quickly change the streaming settings, which I'm not sure I can do while it's streaming, so it's going to stop and restart. Okay, hoping that didn't screw anything up too badly, so we'll see. It is sending data, so that's good. It's telling me the resolution is not optimal, but if I crank it up anymore, then my internet connection is probably going to drop out. So here we go. We are going to start with getting the we're going to start with getting the servo off. So I've got my 2mm, and I'm just going to, in fact, I'm going to use my 2.5mm, get the servo off completely. And a little trick for people who have trouble with servo horns, I'll show you in a second, but I tend to go right through the servo horn and put a bolt on it. So if you've ever had your servo horn come loose at the drag link end, then get yourself a nice panhead bolt. Oh, I've lost the link. We're going to redo the ball ends with PTFE ones anyway, and get yourself a nice little nylock nut, probably not going to show on the stream, and get that nice and tight, and that'll stop your steering from coming undone. Yeah, got the Traxxas PTFE rod ends as well, so hopefully there is a steering one in there. Yes, there is, so we can replace those as we go through. So get this servo off. Wow, that's on tight. The servo is a Holmes Hobbies. It's not died like my previous one did, so that's a good start, although it did have a bit more use on it than this one has. I really like it. Super accurate, super strong, very, very fast for a high torque servo. In fact, crazily fast for a high torque servo. But you pay for that. It's more expensive than a Savox or pretty much anything else apart from maybe the Futaba ones, which you wouldn't use for crawling because they're designed for racing and everything else, so the gearbox would explode. So I'm just taking off the front bumper, so we'll get that off. And yeah, when we do that, we'll be able to open up the rails a bit. Oh, and I've got one that's rounded. Oh, that's a shame. Okay, we'll just clip that out. What's going on with OBS? Are we streaming properly? Yeah, we're streaming properly. YouTube's just whinging at me. Right. That rounded bolt was just going to go in the bin. Now, I don't think I'm going to be able to use this aluminium servo winch mount that I've modified, but I will show you how I've modified it, because the aluminium ones come with a bit more material on them than the brass, because they're not expecting the servo to be upside down. But I prefer the aluminium one because even though you're using the weight of the servo, adding brass just isn't a great idea. Although I say that, I do have brass hex nuts on there for the wheels, but that's just because I rounded the aluminium ones and wanted steel and couldn't find steel, so I got brass. So that's similar to your brass ones that you would probably get, but what I've done is, hopefully the camera might pick it up, is milled out the inside where the where the servo will go, basically, to clearance the servo. Just did that with a Dremel and a milling head, and because it's aluminium, you can use even mild steel, super cheap ones from Amazon. I'm going to throw away this rounded bolt. So the plan here is, on the front we have a panhard link mount that hits my chassis. That is what's stopping me from going super low. So I'm going to replace these 4 standoffs, and in fact I'll only be able to fit 3 on because the servo will be in the way. and they're going to be replaced with 80mm wide ones, which means the whole thing should be wide enough to go past that panhard thing, and we should get even lower. The downside to that is that the front end's going to be a bit wide and it might affect the steering, but I'm about to put on wheel extenders, track extenders, so hopefully the wheels aren't going to rub and I just get an extra 6mm each side of track width. Now some people put 20mm wide ones on. The thing is, with my 3mm offset wheels, I'm already showing the C-hubs anyway, so a bit wider isn't necessarily going to show those off too much, although it does mean that you have to be a bit careful of catching the C-hubs. Some people at that point tend to go straight axle instead of portals, but I still like the gear reduction in the portals, and I like that little bit of clearance for slightly awkward climbs where the pumpkin might hang up on a straight rig. But really, at this point, there's no huge benefit to portals on this crawler, but I do like the TRX stuff. I've got the hardened Gpm bits in here, and it is what it is. I'm not going to spend another few £100 on an SCX10 kit to use those, or a Capra kit. I like the TRX stuff, but the others are equally valid. So I'm going to get these standoffs off, and then I'm going to start removing the 3-link bits, and we'll get the servo mounted as well. So we'll save some of these bolts. No point chucking them all away. I have been unkind to my future self by using mixed size bolts, but it's not the end of the world. Also means I might be able to adjust the length of some of the links as well. We're going to see where things start to catch, and what I might do is shorten the front links slightly, and that'll let me get the drag link with a bit more clearance. But we'll see how we go, because the wheelbase is fine, everything's fine at the moment, so I don't want to mess about with that too much. Yeah. Try and get this lower standoff unbolted. And yeah, we're still going. If you're watching this on playback, just skip to the live stream and we'll catch you up. Just tell me in the comments that you've caught up. Right, so now we'll swap back to our 2.5s. We are going to have to take our shocks off, but I'm going to do the panhard first and get the links off, and then the shocks will be the last bit, because that's when it all gets a bit floppy. Right. Imagine the only person that's watching this at the moment is my wonderful wife. No one else seems to be watching it live. But hopefully if you're watching it on catch up, thank you very much. To be fair, I didn't advertise this one as much as I've advertised other ones, because it just went awful last time when I was trying to fabricate stuff and talk. So I thought I'd give myself a break and just see who turned up, rather than try and attract lots of people and then, oh yeah, my internet connection went out as well. Right, so we've got our panhard link off, or panhard rod. So we'll swap back to the MIP driver that I've put somewhere. Oh, that's struggling. Let's see if the Wera one does any better, because it's a Hex Plus. Nope, I've got another rounded bolt. And I'll show you the weird fix I did for my panhard not fitting as well as originally intended. Yeah, I'm not going to get that off without taking the drag link off. Also, in the process of slamming this truck, I gave my steering rod a really good bend, so yeah, that's going to get put back. But let's see if we can get this panhard situation sorted. And I've been very silly because I did put the bolts that I needed for the 1/10 thing on this pad, and then I've thrown a load of other bolts on it, so I'm not sure which ones are the right ones. I think it's these two. Yeah, great. Right, so I'm just going to have to use these engineer pliers that are designed for getting rid of stuck bolts, just to get rid of this stuck bolt. Hopefully it's just going to come loose reasonably easy. If not, this could be a bit tough. Is that turning? Yeah, that's turning now. Even though it's rounded, I can just kind of twist it out a bit with a bit of sideways pressure with a cheap Allen key. Hex driver, they are hex drivers. Don't know why I call them Allen keys all the time. Put my phone down somewhere as well. Where is it? There we go. Cool. Right, so in order to slam my scattergun, I have a huge amount of spacers on that, so that's the panhard mount. I've got a huge amount of spacers on there, probably 2/3 of an inch, or 1/2 inch to 2/3 of an inch, to move the panhard rod back into the divot where there's a bit more clearance, and so that allowed me to get the panhard rod nice and high. Right, now we're going to take this last standoff off, which will open out the chassis. And hopefully we can just pop the standoffs in and see if they make enough width for the mount idea to actually happen. So that should open out enough. So now I can get my axle. It's a bit tight because it's been bent into shape. So my panhard, hopefully the camera's picking that up, my panhard link now fits inside the frame. So I'm going to put a 80mm spacer on there, or 80mm standoff, which I think is that one, just to see if that creates enough space for this to work. Yep, it does. That is going to work. I mean, it's a horrible spacer, it's made everything very wide, but needs must, and we want this thing to be slammed. So if we want it to be slammed, we're going to have to go with it. Okay, interesting. So that probably means that my skid isn't as wide as I thought it is. Yeah, it looks like my skid is a 70mm skid. So I might put some spacers in the skid so that there's a bit less of a bend out. That won't be too hard because it's only 2 or 3 bolts. But yeah, we'll do that in a minute. Right. Let's get this servo mounted and take a look at what we need to do for links. Oops. Try and capture that bolt. And again, we're going servo on axle just for performance. It's a, I call it a comp rig, but it is just a high performance cheetah rig. I don't compete yet. And I don't think anyone competes at the moment because, you know, COVID. COVID is a pain, which is probably the understatement of the year. Now, if I've been sensible enough, yeah, I have enough clearance from my servo wires to be able to get that on there. So the way this mount works, this is the 1/10 mount. Not sure how well the camera picks that up. It sits on top of the diff and it connects to where the panhard link would be. And then it's got a little brace that goes on the side, which I need to find an appropriate size bolt for because I didn't take that into account. And that one bolts onto the side of the link that's captured on there. So yeah, we will start popping that on. It also encases where your normal panhard, not your panhard, where your third link would be. So I'm going to take my third link off and try and just test fit this for now. Yeah, that bolt's now going to be too short, so I'll see if I've got a suitable one somewhere. Because I'm doing it with 3D printed stuff, I am using countersunk screws so that they just bite in a bit better. But you don't want to over tighten 3D printed stuff. Yeah, that's going to be spot on. So what I'll do is I'll actually just take my shocks off so they won't be dangling around in the way. And also because my link mounts stop me from getting in there. But I've got the Gpm Link Mounts, and what they do is they give you 5 settings for where your suspension connects to the hubs. So it actually puts your suspension on a slight angle, which I'm going to correct slightly, but it gives you a ton of articulation, and amazingly slams the truck by up to probably, difficult to say, but probably about again about ½ an inch more than you would if you were doing it normally. Right, so I'm just trying to get this link mount out. A bit stiff. Sorry, the bolt for the link out, and because this servo is going to bolt onto the right hand side. Hopefully I've done the right one. I've done the wrong one. It's going to bolt onto the left hand side link mount. It's what happens when you work and talk. Not the end of the world. Okay, so we'll get that undone. We'll just check the length of that because we'll probably need a longer one. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. That's got an extra 5mm. That should be fine. So we're going to start with putting the link mount on, and then just getting that brace to line up with my bolts, which it doesn't want to do, but we will start with getting the lower links in, because that'll be the easiest way to line it all up. These lower links again are brass ones because I broke the plastic ones and wanted metal, and aluminium seemed like twice the price of brass. So I thought, you know, extra 20 grams won't kill me. And then after that I've gone all lightweight, so now I regret it, but you know, it is what it is at the time. Right, interesting. So because these are designed for the original ones, this may not fit, but we will try. Yeah, that's more like it, right. Just needs positioning correctly, isn't the easiest thing to get in. It's not on camera at the moment. If anyone does want a close-up, just shout up in the chat and I'll sort that out. I'll keep holding the truck up and hoping that the autofocus doesn't mess with me. And I'm not replacing the ball ends for the PTFE ones on anything that's existing. It's just any new links that I create will have brand new rod ends on, and so any brand new rod ends will get the PTFE balls. Right, that's on nice and tight, so I can flip that over. Try not to smash my servo up too much, and now try and marry up the mount. So the mount's going to go on the panhard. Panhard bit. Whoa. Right, that brace is going to cause me a few challenges, but we will get over those. Hopefully that'll be the right size. Oh, that's too long. Got something. Ah, I can just go all the way through. Right. Let's pop that on there. Right. Yeah, that brace just needs folding in a bit. It's just a bit wide. Now I've got to work out where my forelink is going to go. Oh, also sounds like it's just started raining as well. If I can just get my axle drive shafts to line back up again. They've decided to come undone. Probably easier if I just flip it over and drop that servo again. That poor servo. Just going to whip off this drive shaft and see where we get to. While I'm just doing this, just correcting this drive shaft, I've got some videos coming out over the next few weeks to do with tuning your suspension and setting up your suspension or getting it neutral enough ready to tune. Also the beginners series, I've recorded the next tip, so the beginners tip, and just need to pull some footage in there to get that finished off. So yeah, that's cool. Right. Yeah, that's pretty cool. What I'm actually going to do is get some rod ends and put the rod ends in the mount and then screw in some threaded rod, because I don't know what length I need anyway, so that's going to be interesting. But yeah, we'll get these on. In fact, I've done no research, so this is a complete wing it and hope it'll work. I imagine I want a angled rod end of some description. and then that'll allow me to do up those braces and then check everything for clearance. I'm hoping there's some angled ones in this mixed up kit. We'll just chuck them all over the bench and sort them out later. Right, what have we got? We've got, yep, that's one, and that's not one. What have we got? Those two, great. And the best angle would be there. Right, cool. Nut just hit me. Right, we'll get these coated ones in carefully. Try and get them in the same way. Right. So what I'm going to do is just install these. That'll help me capture those. Is that the right length? Yeah, that's the right length. Don't know what happened there, having so much trouble with OBS, which is the broadcasting software. Yeah, really sorry that cut out, but not a lot I can do about it. I'm just going to put this link mount back on. Yeah, this isn't the usual quality I get from Shapeways. Everything's just a bit off. It's like it's not been cleaned out properly. So I've got the right hand side done. So the panhard link mount is back on. That's screwed on. There's a bolt through to hold one side of the forelink, and I'm going to flip it over, do the other side of the forelink, or at least the servo mount's ready for the forelink. I did make up two links. I've started getting messy because I'm getting flustered. Right, we will flip that over, get this bolt in, and tweak this until it works. So hopefully it'll be a case of getting this bolt through the finishing material. It's a shame because the Shapeways quality has generally been pretty spot on. So I mean, it could be that the 1/10 mount isn't perfect, but I've not seen anyone complain about that either, so I think it does seem like print tolerance to me. Just struggling to get this bolt in the hole it needs to be in. Bear with me, and then I will carry on. There we go. Right, so now I can get my extra little doodad in there. Right. Right, that all feels That all feels a bit more solid now, so just going to make sure that's on and in and tight. Yeah, it feels that way. It's not gone together perfectly, but it's gone together well enough for me, which means I now get to drop my servo around and do my drive shaft and everything else. Oh, right, okay. So now we've got links in there, we can, well, I can start to, do you know what, I'm going to Loctite that one because it's feeling a bit loose. That is not feeling the best. Just drip it in from the back. There we go. Right, there we go. Great. Bit of Loctite, not too bad. Right. Now it's time to do some links. So I'm just going to move a few things to one side. It shouldn't be too hard. So I've got my 2 links. I need to that doesn't feel like it's gone on very straight. So I'm just going to give it a bit of a twist to see what's going on there. Yeah, feels like this brace isn't in properly. I wouldn't be bothered because I'll be able to sort out the servo in terms of offset, but the fact it's a bit twisted means that the forelink is going to be uneven. So I'm just going to try and just tweak it to try and get it a bit straighter. At least the Wi-Fi is holding up a bit better now. Try and loosen that out a bit. There we go. Right. Right, the bolt I've used is a bit too long, so I'm just going to get that out. I think the two bolts are just clashing into each other, so we'll get that bolt out and then see where we're at. But yeah, it's not the easiest process. It seemed like it would just go together really easily, but it seems to be going on slightly wonky, and that's concerning. I can always chuck a spacer or something in there, so it's not the end of the world, but it I will be quite annoyed if I can't get this out to be able to adjust it. So let's see if we can get this bolt out first, because I don't want that to thrash the thread or anything else. Get the one out for the brace and then use the brace as leverage. Hey Aussie Macca. So, trying to get a 4-link servo on axle conversion on here, mate. So it's not working. The brace that should hold it all together is not going on in a nice way. So I'm just going to try and pull it back out. There we go. It's just really not wanting to come back out. There we go. So I'll just grab a shorter bolt for that. Ah, 4-wheel steer. That's, yeah. So as you know, you'll need a front axle, but this is the 1/10 kit. I think it's probably designed to go with standard TRX mounts, yeah, and the mounts that I've got aren't standard, so I'm going to have to put some shims and spacers in. It definitely needs spacers between my panhard and the brace for the panhard, and then that means I should, if I've got my shorter bolt, yeah, that should go in quite easily now. Unless I've rounded this mount, in which case I'll get one of the spare ones, because I knew that I might have problems, so I made sure I bought 3, because they come in packs of 3 if you choose that option. So yeah, there's just a few fitment issues with my non-standard links that look like standard links, but obviously must just be ever so slightly different. Why companies feel the need to try and reinvent the shape of things when the standard shape is absolutely fine, I do not know, because then it means that other parts don't fit and you have these kind of issues. I'm trying to line up this brace as much as possible with the hole for the link mount, but it's yeah, it's tight, but it should be tight because that provides some tension, which provides some bracing, so it's all good. Yeah, that's gone through now, so I can now tap that all up. and that'll be the left side done, and I can go back to the right side, sort that out, and then make some links. Which is always fun. I'm just going to use threaded rod for the links. They don't need to be strong because they're the upper links. But I have a bunch of washers here, so if I can manage to squeeze some washers in between this mount somehow, I might have to get creative here. I think I've got some tweezers, and I'm hoping I can kind of drop a few washers in, and that will stop it from twisting when I do it up. I might find that the angle's a bit weird or it's the wrong size, but no, they are dropping in quite easily. Or at least the first one went in super easy. Yeah, it'll be one or two. So it just needs spacing out because this panhard mount, or where the 3-link, where the panhard connects to the axle, that being a metal brass one, or brass is metal, that being a metal one just means it's a slightly different shape than the standard Traxxas plastic one. It also explains why I could never quite get my 3-link to the spec that was in the instructions, because obviously it's a different shape. So if it's a different shape, it will never follow the build kit instructions for getting the right tolerances. Right, I've wedged 3 spacers in there. I'm just going to give that a squeeze and see. Yeah, that's fixed that issue. So get the right tip on. We should be able to get that nice and tight, and then when I take a look at it, that's now straight. That's awesome. And again, I've managed to disconnect my drive shaft, so I'll see if I can force it back together. No, I can't, so that's going to be another off and on again job. Because I've already got the links, or sorry, the rod ends attached for anyone that's catching up or has skipped to this point. I can't see myself taking things on and off too much. I'm going to get some threaded rod. I'm going to get the Dremel out. But first, I'm going to find a steel ruler that I have lying around somewhere, or had lying around somewhere. It's a bit of a mess in here at the moment because I was filming last night and just threw stuff down and went. So interesting. Sure, I had a steel ruler in here. Oh yeah, it's hiding under a pile of stuff. Oh yes, I've got some springs. I'm going to swap the rear springs over as well as doing those axle spacers. But I was going to do that after I've got the servo mounted. Unfortunately with the servo it's not easy to disconnect it because it's all soldered in and zip tied on and everything else. What I'm going to do is make up some more rod ends. So hopefully I've got some more angled ones. I have. Got an angled one there, an angled one there. Got my lovely PTFE coated balls. So I know I rag on Gmade quite a bit, but Traxxas with their upgrades do PTFE coated balls. Gmade do aluminium anodized balls. And what happens is the anodizing wears off in seconds, then the aluminium turns to powder, and then your rod ends wear out and sag and snap. whereas the PTFE coated ones just slip and slide and work brilliantly. They're a fantastic upgrade. They are a bit pricey, and the coating can chip off, but it usually doesn't chip off around the ball part. It's usually at the sides, and yeah, they stay smooth and silky for ages. That's a weird term, isn't it? Right. Great. So I'm going to dig through my literal parts bin. This is where I throw any bits that I take off other things, and just get some spacers and just see what I've got knocking around, because I want to. I run a very strange setup compared to other people. So other people will have a 4-link setup where the links cross. That's really good for changing your roll center, but with this being so low center of gravity, the roll center doesn't really come into it too much anyway. And with the hub extenders, it's really not going to be a challenge. So I tend to run my rear links, so the ones down to the rear axle are spaced by just a single bolt and a shim, a spacer, and the top one's practically next to it. So the offset between the two links where they join the chassis is probably only about 5 mil. I'm going to be doing a very similar thing on here. My top ones are just going to run out to these areas, and I'm going to try and see if I can close down the separation, and also I'm also going to try and get my suspension slammed, super slammed. And in fact, at this point here, the axle, so the rails are sat on top of the mount. That is about as low as I can get it. If I push these a bit wider, maybe that's as low as I can get it. So it's got to the point where I can barely get a finger underneath the skid, and by the time I've changed the rear mounts, I think the skid's going to be somewhere between 10 and 15 mil lower. So that's going to be awesome. That's going to be really good. Right, so we'll do some links. So I've got rod ends, the axle mounted servo mount. In the UK, you have to get them off Shapeways. They're quite expensive. A pack of 3 was about €70. The reason why I got 3 is they're 3D printed, so if it snaps, got spares. They do look quite beefy, and they do say they can deal with the Holmes Hobby servo, but I got 3 anyway. From the US, you can get them from quite a few places. I can't remember the manufacturer, but there is a manufacturer that makes a brass one that then takes the axial servo mounts, so that would be really cool if you're in the States. I'm also, when I get my 3D printer, going to try printing one that doesn't have this wide bracing, and instead of mounting it to the panhard, I'm actually going to use the bolts for the diff that hold the diff plate on. So that will be interesting when I print those, and that will probably also include replacement link mounts. So it's going to take a fair bit of designing. That's going to come after some of the other crazy ideas I've had. So I can only find a couple of spacers. Hopefully I can find 2 or 3 about the same size, which will be useful. So they're the same size, and those 2 are the same size, so that one can go. Great, so I'm just making 2 little piles of 3 spacers, making sure they're all roughly the same size. Are they all the same size spacer? Yeah, okay, cool. And so this is going to be offset by the spacers. On the Scattergun, what I've got is quite a few different link mounts. What I'm going to do is, there's like a ladder of 3 with 2 next to them. Actually, there's one a bit further forwards, and it's that I'm going to use, which should give me enough articulation. Yeah, need some bolts. I'm using the countersunk bolts because the holes in here are only just a bit bigger than the screws themselves, and by using the countersunks, it kind of gives them a little bit of flex or wiggle if they need it. And I might, depending on where the axle is, I might be able to get a brace across there, I'm not sure. So we'll see how that goes. But before, all I'm going to do is sort of get the bolt in, get the spacers on. Now the spacers are so that the rod end clears the rod end below it. When you run your rod ends so close together, they just need to be slightly offset so that you can get them, you can get the vertical separation dropped, and then you can get everything to work. Right. Yeah, right. So my spacers are on. That's given me enough space from the other end. This screw that I'm using is not long enough, but it should give me the ability to measure how long that gap is. And actually, it's a fairly tiny gap, so it shouldn't be too hard. That said, I've not thought this through in terms of how I'm actually going to measure it, because it's kind of wobbling around everywhere. So I'm going to try and support the 2 rod ends, measure an approximate length between them, which is... I need to get myself a metal rule that's got millimeters on both sides, because when it tries to do it in inches, that makes it a bit difficult. Right. So I think I'm going to start with a 67mm rod. So you get the Dremel out, cut 2 pieces of rod, screw those into the rod ends, button everything up, and test it all out. I'll just check if that's wide enough to get a nylock on it. Yeah, that's cool. Right, 2 of those. Right, so budget tip. Definitely a budget tip, this one. Silicone mats from eBay, super cheap. Definitely recommend getting some of those if you're doing any soldering or any cutting. Talking about cutting, I use a cheap Dremel. It's actually a Detlev Pro from Amazon, and it's about 1/10 the cost of a normal Dremel, and then you buy the Dremel cut-off wheels, so you get all of the abrasion and great cutting power of a Dremel from a cheap-ass Dremel copy. Oh, I've even got a cutting wheel already on, so that's fantastic. So I just need my little tool. And unplug my heater, because I'm red hot anyway. Dropping bolts everywhere as well. plug this in, get this wheel sorted, do some sparks on camera and try not to cut any fingers off, as good for the views as that would be. Right. So for the links, I'm going to do the threaded rod method, and because it's for the upper links, so you get a lot of the strength from the lower links. The lower links I've got a threaded rod with brass sleeve because I couldn't find links at the custom length that I've got, and because they're so short it's not been an issue. For the top ones I'm just going to do threaded rod and see how it goes. It's going to be about a 60mm length, so actually there's not a huge amount of flex, and the top links don't get flexed too much. My other top links are aluminium, and I've smashed the lower aluminium ones and snapped those loads, but the top ones don't seem to get that stressed. I am just going to grab a Sharpie though. I'm going to measure the first one, cut it, and then measure the second one. I've made the mistake of measuring them both, then cutting, and then not realising that the Sharpie is like 5mm wide, and I've cut the wrong side and everything else. So when I'm cutting metal rod, hold it with a pair of pliers to try and keep the heat away. And it's just a case of trying not to get too much in my eyes. I turn the drill up to level 5, which is the speed that the cutting wheel wants to be at. And then it turns, and it's going to turn and send the sparks down. So there it goes. Right, so we won't touch that short one because that'd be super hot, and this top one, the heat should have transferred along the length of it. Oh, someone's just posted in the chat about making uppers with carbon fibre tube with long set screws, CA glued in for uppers. That is a truly fantastic idea. I'm going to have to look for some carbon fibre tube. That is a brilliant idea. I was thinking about 3D printing some. Just as an engineering exercise to see whether a printed structure can be made as rigid but more lightweight. But I mean, given that we're talking about 68 mils of metal rod, it's not necessarily too much of an issue. I do have a file somewhere as well that I'm going to use to just round off any ends. Put my Sharpie down. I'm not doing too well today. I'm tired. Right, let's go. Do you know what? I'm going to take a photo of that in the chat because I'll forget to record it. But that's awesome. That carbon fibre idea is brilliant. Yeah, I've had some ideas about silly things I can do 3D printing as well. They'll be on the channel. They will be. So, let's go. So we'll let that first one cool. I'll just grab my file, do the previous one. They're about the same length. The thing is, when you're doing links, it doesn't matter if you don't cut them perfectly, because you screw them into the rod ends, and if you don't do them, like if they're like a mil or two out, then one of them's just a bit short. And as long as you can get a good, I'll probably say a good 6 to 8 mil into the rod end, you're not going to have any problems. All I'm doing is just shaving off any burrs where it's kind of tipped out, so it doesn't cut a bigger thread than it needs to. Again, rod ends are plastic. It's you can be perfect if you want to be perfect, but it's not necessary. And I think there's enough things that we have to focus on, but making sure these are right. Okay, so still warm. So the great thing about rod ends as well, if you don't drop them, is yeah, they come. Right, okay, so wow, carbon fibre uppers for $5. Now, as you can probably tell, I've got an English accent, and a lot of the places that I put videos of are in England, so I think we pay a bit more than you do, but you know, the equivalent for us would be around about £10 would be about fair. So yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. I will try and get hold of some carbon fibre and have a little play with that. Hopefully you don't mind if I do it on the channel or on a live stream, but you will absolutely get credit for that one. That is awesome. And in fact, I think I've already got the set screws, as long as they're the right size. Yeah, I've got boxes of, I think I call them grub screws, but yeah, they're set screws. Yeah, while this truck is built to be quite tough, I've been trying to make it a little bit more lighter weight, and so therefore I have gone for lighter parts. But I do tend to favour metal for the overall weight of this truck. At the moment, it is 2.7 kilos with a battery. Oh, awesome! Thank you. He's just said yes, I can do a video on that. That's great. So yeah, this truck is about 2.7 kilos, but it has I think they're 14 or 12 gauge stainless steel rails. The rails are ridiculously tough. It's bounced off all sorts of things. 3D printed skid and sliders, and then lightweight electronics. So I've tried to keep the weight as low as possible, but yes, if I can convince Corwin, who does Northwest Scaler Designs, to do a G10 or release the Team Aluminium versions to the public, that will be amazing. This bit's going to be fun because I've realised I've left my calipers in the house, so I'm currently in the garage. That's why there's a brick wall behind me, as YouTubey weird that I've tried to light it. When you go on YouTube, it gives you loads of Creators Academy stuff, and one day I just decided to have a look, and that's why the lighting's changed, and there's the lights to separate me from the background, I think it's called. Right, this is just threading in now, and as I thought, these feel stiff enough for upper links. I'm going to screw them both together, measure them with a ruler. I would normally use calipers, but you only need to be accurate to about 1 millimeter. Won't make a huge amount of difference. I am lucky that because I had the common sense or the insanity for some people because of the noise to run a revolver snub nose, I don't have to care about motor clearance because my motor is tiny. Oh, cool. Carbon fiber rail design. Ah, that sounds cool. Is that TRX based, that rail design that you're talking about in the chat, or is it a bit more generic? Right, we're at 44 mils on one. It is TRX based, right. If you go to my Facebook or my Instagram page and drop me a message, I will be very interested in probably buying a prototype set or helping you out with the prototype. If you want to share. But as I say, the Scattergun is amazing, has been amazing, and will be amazing. But my G500, that will go on some different rails at some point. As much as I keep telling people I'm going to keep it stock, I won't. Ah, the in the works skid. Yeah, I've got the in the works skid, but I'm running the brazing skid at the moment. And what I've done is I've drilled the skid because it had enough rigidity to fit onto a scattergun, which is a normal TRX bolt pattern. But I've mounted it differently. I've mounted it much further forward. So I looked at putting my in the works skid back on, and actually it turned out that my brazing skid, because of where I've mounted it, actually brings the motor to the same place as the brazing as the in the works skid, and also has the benefit of having the transmission lower. And when I sort of weighed up all the options, I could have lowered the motor, and when I looked at it, the motor weighs 80 grams, the gearbox weighs about 190 grams, and what would have happened with the in the works is the 190 grams would have raised and the motor would have lowered, and actually it wasn't too great. Ah, cool. No worries, dude. So yeah, I think you will have quite a few people interested in your custom rails as soon as they are ready. It's always good to have options. It's always good to have a healthy ecosystem. But as I say, Corwin, who runs Northwest Scalar Designs, yeah, I've not interacted with many business owners as cool and nice and community focused as him. I think Gabe from G Speed would be another good example of someone who's super community focused. Yeah, so you cut your in the works skid down. I cut my in the works skid down. I will warn you now, if you cut the skid down, cut the same amount off the motor mount that the third link goes into, because otherwise it puts some sideward pressure on it, and if the truck bangs, it actually snaps the motor mount. So if you've cut the skid, take the same amount off the motor mount. You know what? I'll send Corwin a message later that I'm not the only one that thinks that. He's been really cool with me and offered me loads of support, and yeah. But yeah, I absolutely want to see your design. Do you have a name for it? Have you thought of a name for it yet? I'm talking to someone on the chat. This guy called Christopher Fulton, because I know that the chat doesn't always replay, is talking about his own design for a carbon skid, and it sounds really cool. But he's also just said that if Northwest Scalar Designs, are you watching, Corwin? If Northwest Scalar Designs actually did a carbon version, then it should save him a lot of effort. So yeah. But yeah, the more options we have, the better. And And the more people who do it as friendly competition, the better. Like, it's always good to have lots of different designs, but support each other. Don't go into like compete in terms of, you know, RC competition, but yeah, be cool about it. Everyone has their own philosophy. That's why Toyozukis are so weird and so cool, because they just do their own thing and they don't follow the trends. Right, I'm just having a bit of a challenge getting one of the spacers on, so I'm just going to be wiggling things about. So I can see there's more people logging on, more concurrent viewers, and my internet's tidied up as well, so that it's not too bad. I'm going to have to tip this on its side to get these spacers on. But yeah, I've managed to get the mount on, managed to build some links, and the links that I've built are at the moment just threaded rod. And I'm just going to see how strong they feel before I decide whether to sleeve them or not. And really annoyingly, I have just spent all that time putting those spacers on and used a screw that's too short. So hopefully that's a bit of a longer screw. Is that a bit of a longer one? There we go. But I've managed to get it back on the spacers, so we're all good. Right. So I'll hold this up to the camera in a minute, once I've just got this bolt on. Right, for anyone that can't watch the chat replay, if you're watching this back later, the name of the design is, I don't know what I'm doing, but here's a cobbled together design made in a barn rail. I think that should be turned into an acronym, and that would be awesome. Right, we can talk about geometry and everything else. So, yeah, absolutely. So I have got my 4-links in. So my 4-link runs from the inside, from the standard 3-link position out to the standard 3-link position out here, but my axle links run almost vertical down the frame. And I've done the same. I've got another link that goes across. They are just M4, M3 threaded, M4 threaded rod. They are nothing special. Now what I've got to do is just check my diffs for their pinion angle, and that's actually looking like it might be all right. So that's great. Yeah. So these servo mounts are, they might be available on Thingiverse. I thought I had a box of them somewhere. They are the 1/10 RC. Yeah, the 1/10 RC servo mount from Shapeways, the 2.3 version. It's been a bit of a pain to install, but yeah, it's doing all right. I'm just going to have some water because I've been streaming for an hour and a half and not drunk anything. So we're starting to make progress. So we now have our links in place, and at this point I'm going to mount the servo up. Oh, someone's talking about a Scattergun 6x6. That would be crazy. That would be absolutely mad. I'm going to get these, I'm going to use the standard Traxxas bolts to mount this servo. Servo is the Holmes Hobbies BLS SH3 500 V3. Review of it went live last week. It's a badass servo. It did break one well, I didn't break one. I had one that broke. They've updated the programming. I'm not sure whether it's going to work the way that they say it does, because I have noticed with the programming that it still does make the same noise all the time. So I'm a bit skeptical as to whether they've fixed the programming. But John Holmes is a very clever dude and very good and active in this community, so I'm not going to rag on him. Coronavirus meant that it took 3 months for him to get the parts and the programming and get everything and get it sent back to the UK. But he did warranty it and not argue, and you know, there was no fuss, no challenge, nothing. Right. So I set my electric screwdriver to the minimum torque and don't hold it very tight so it sort of spins out my hand. That's just so I don't overstress the 3D printed parts. Right, we are looking pretty cool. Will the camera pick it up? No, because I've set the camera up for filming and everything else, so it doesn't thing. So we have a servo on axle. That is pretty cool. At this point, I probably need to put my shocks back on, but I need to work out spacers because I want to see how wide I can get my frame to go down. Right. Awesome. Nice one. All right, cool, Chris. Christopher, catch you later. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing those rails. They're going to be cool. Going to be different. Right, we've got some aluminium standoffs. So we're going to do standoffs. We'll do the springs on the rear, drop the suspension, and go from there. So these will be a bit stiff to put in the first time. So I'm going to try and get one at the front and one at the rear and hope that the links aren't going to bash into it. And that should help me open up some space. Or in fact, if I do one, yeah, if I do one for my suspension, that'll be great. So now I'm going to swap over to my bolts of choice for this kind of stuff, which I am quickly running out of. Oh dear. Right, we'll go with putting the shocks back on to dingle dangle around. Now, if you're one of those people with a perfect crawler and you put tape on your pliers and make sure that you don't have any scratches and everything else, look away now, because I'm just going to grab this nice black anodized standoff with a pair of pliers and just get it on, because life is too short. Right. I'm also going to try and force this bolt in. I don't think it's going to want to go in without me increasing the torque quite a bit. So what we'll do is just open up the frame, put the other bolt in, and do it with the screwdriver and a thing. Right, I've lost my shock. There we go. So now we're doing the standoffs. We're doing super wide standoffs, like wider than I would normally want to do, because it would interfere with the steering, because you would clip the rails with your wheels. But the low centre of gravity is the trade-off that I'm going to make there. So if I lose a couple of degrees of steering, hopefully not that much, but if I lose some steering, it's not the end of the world, because what I'm going to gain is a lower centre of gravity. And yes, that's got those rails to sit slightly wide of the servo mount, so I am going to get an extra few mil out of this, so that's going to be quite cool. So the way to test that is to, that shock just doesn't want to go in there properly, so I'll take that one off and put it back in. How did the surplus work? Oh, surpass motors. Not very well in the end. The smaller surpass motors that I got, the pinion, the axle for the pinion was a 4mm, so I couldn't find any pinions for it. So I had to look at the bigger one again. So I need to get some epoxy resin to epoxy the magnet back onto it to test it with the budget ESC again. I'm just going to crank this right up and screw this in because it just doesn't want to screw in. Both these bolts are the same size, it's just the one on the left doesn't seem to want to go into this standoff. So right, okay, so the bolt snapped, so that standoff's knackered. Well, that was obviously going to happen, wasn't it? So I will get some shorter bolts and try that again. Yeah, that was fine. I don't know why one's gone in and one hasn't, but now I've managed to snap off a bolt inside it, it's going to be useless. So let's go with, yeah, that should be long enough. Yeah, get some decent Loctite on that. Yeah, which surpass did you get? So I got some, so the guy who's talking to me, I got a 3520 and a 3538, I think. And it was the 3520s that had the 4mm shafts. Oh, right, I see why that snapped. It's because it was the wrong type of bolt to use for that application. Right, well, I'll Loctite these this time round, so hopefully that won't happen again. So yeah, I wanted to use the tiny surpass motors because I wanted them to be as small as a revolver snub nose, but that wasn't to be the case, so not the end of the world. I will, yeah, get that big one converted and go from there. But yeah, the budget ESC, the ESC's got really nice startup, and in fact, the one that I got really annoyed with from Amazon might have actually been the best one for my application. I'm just struggling with bolt length, so I'll just be a second while I find an appropriate length one. Not longer. No, it's not. When I get bolts in a rush from Amazon, they keep sending me them and the dividers have like fallen out, so it's really annoying. Yeah, 3542, that's the one I got, but that's quite a torque dense motor, and I was trying to use something a bit lighter. Right, I'm gonna have to use a different type of screw for these. So just gonna get these off and get the right screws on. I need a 25mm long screw, and I just don't seem to have any in the type that I want to use. 1250, yeah, mine was a 1400. But the ESC that I really liked was the Tyrannosaurus Rex T-Rex ESC. It's a budget brushless ESC, and it's what is it? It's a 120 amp ESC, and they're usually about $20 or £25, depending on your country that you live in and the ridiculous taxation regime that's enforced on you. Right, I'm just getting these plastic bushings off the shocks so I can put my shocks back on. Yeah, just pick those bolts. So I've got a 25mm bolt to go on. My other ones are covered in, yeah. The 3542 should mount to your transmission plate because it's got 25mm spacing on one side. One side's 19mm and one side's 25mm. You can also get the sort of cross adapters for drones and hold those at a weird angle and they kind of fit as well. Just takes a bit of wiggling and turning. But you can get, yeah, cross adapters that are 19 to 25mm as well. Right, let's try this again. Let's get some Loctite. Right, I'm not going to use power tools this time on my standoff. Yeah, send me a message on Facebook. I think it's all set up for just scaling, so I should be available. Right, it's getting a little bit messy. That's usually the sign of me getting a bit flustered. So, yeah, there's my 2mm. Right. So I recorded a video last night actually about suspension. So one of them is about springs and one of them's about springs and one is about damping, and the springs also covers the lay down shock. The blue ESC. So I had 2 blue ESCs. One was that TRX one that was really good, but then I tried to waterproof it using nail varnish and got it wrong, and it set on fire. The other one was working really well until I had the standard surpass issue where the motor decided to spit a magnet out, get stuck, and then the ESC fried it. So yes, but not on the tiny motor that I was running, not on the 3520. They were both very good on the 120 amp one. And what I'll do is, I'm not sure I've put the video up of the smaller one setting on fire yet. So what I'll do there is I'll send you the settings as well on a Facebook message, because I used different settings after the video and actually got quite a nice slow startup. Nowhere near as good as a brushed or a castle, but probably not far off a reasonably fast axe. So what you're trading off there is you've got the incredible amount of torque that you get out of that brushed motor. I'm just removing some grass out of my drive shaft. Some incredible amount of torque off the brush motor, but yeah, you're just sacrificing startup. But then again, that was startup on flat ground. Startup on a hill was super smooth because you've got the back pressure. Right. Yeah, I was out. Actually, some of this isn't necessarily grass. I think some of it's sheep hair as well. I was out at Little Armscliff last week, which if you're in Yorkshire is an awesome place to both do super advanced rock crawling but also beginner rock crawling on rocks, because everything's about 4 foot high, so you can catch the truck. And it was brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. Right, now I've got my shocks on. I'm just going to lift. Yeah, so I've lifted the shocks to their full travel, and my pinion angle's good. I'm going to compress the whole truck, and now I can't get my fingers under it. We haven't quite hit the deck yet, but we're not far off. RC Mac is asking about a Sidewinder. RPP Hobby. If you pay for the express shipping, you will get a customs charge, but overall it's about £10 more than if you bought it in the UK, but it comes from the US, and mine took 4 days. I was absolutely blown away by that. Right, for me to be able to slam this, because I've got high clearance links, those high clearance links are going to come out. Not the high clearance links, one of the standoffs is going to come out. But it's alright, because I've already got 2 in there, so it's not the end of the world. And then we're going to slam the rear, and we're going to see if we've still got an angled skid by slamming the rear. And then it might be that I've taken it too low. But right now I'm a little bit excited, because it looks like that falling, as well as giving me more accurate steering, is going to let me get this thing even lower. And every time I've taken it lower, the performance has just gone up massively. So yeah, this is looking good. Right, I've nearly got this bolt out. Wow, that's like pressure fit in there. Right, let me see. Yeah, great. So, taking that standoff out, so now I can get this slammed. Gonna move my mats out the way, and I'm also quickly going to plug in my heater, because I'm getting a little bit chilly. So just be a sec. Right, so if I push this down now, yeah. So I need to put a standoff in to hold the rails open a bit more. And then I think I'm not going to quite get it as slammed as I wanted today. But it's definitely, I can't even get my knuckle in there without the suspension activating. And if I get that extra bit of width on that rail, that's going to be perfect. Oh no, Aussie Mac has said it's out of stock. That's probably because I keep telling people to buy them from RPP Hobby. Castle are making more. I do know that they're running out of stock. The SW4 is about 2 years old now, so they're probably going to come out with an SW5 soon. For brushless, sensorless, get the SW4, but if you're getting brushless censored, get the Mamba X. Simply because the SW4, they changed the hardware, which means that it starts up better sensorless than the Mamba does. A couple of people on the internet, as usual, are in uproar about that their expensive Mambas aren't as good as the inexpensive Sidewinder. Don't know how they think a Sidewinder is inexpensive, but people are people. So I need to make sure I'm putting in the right sized standoffs so they come straight out the packet. Get some Loctite on these and get these standoffs in, and then we are nearly there. What I'm going to try and do is try and use a going to try and use a 70mm bumper. It's actually the rear bumper mount, but I'm going to flip it upside down to try and bow in the front so that it hugs around that panhard mount, which I will show shortly once I've managed to make it clear and everything's up and running. Right, put some Loctite on that. Didn't do the other one. Don't buy a Sidewinder 3, it doesn't have the sensorless startup that the 4 has, unfortunately, which is a shame. Yeah, the revolver's an awesome motor. The snub nose is probably, like, compared to all the other Holmes Hobbies motors, it's probably one of the best value ones in terms of performance when paired with something. Obviously, it doesn't have the power of a Puller Pro, it doesn't have the power of even the standard revolver, but they've really put a lot of effort into making it as torque dense as possible, especially in the V2, and it's an incredible thing, and it's absolutely wonderful to drive with. It's going to be one of those days. I've just snapped yet another bolt inside of a standoff. Now I can recycle this standoff because it's snapped at a place that I can get it back out, but I need to be a lot better with my bolt sizing. Love the sound of a revolver. Yeah, I like the sound. It can leave you with your ears ringing a bit if you get a bit too close to your truck for too long. And it's even louder. People say it's not as loud in person. It's even louder in person, I feel. I think it depends on your shell. Right, I'm going to pick more appropriate sized bolts this time and not screw this up. So we'll get these standoffs in. Fortunately, I bought a pack of 15 standoffs and waited for them to come from China, so they were dead cheap. They were like £4 for 15. Which is great, but now I've spent an amount of money on a 3D printer, I know my wife is watching, hey darling, then I'll be able to print my own standoffs, which will be great, because a kilo of material is like 20 quid, so considering I would need like 40 grams, that's a bargain. Pro tip, if you're doing live stream and you're trying to do bolts, then make sure your screwdriver's going the right way. Right, so now I've got the spacers in for the top, I need to space out the bottom. And I'm just going to do that by putting a standoff where the bumper would normally go, and then we'll look at our steering angle later, because right now I'm bothered about centre of gravity and getting the suspension as low as possible. So I was hoping, on these GPM mounts you've got 5 positions, I was hoping to go from position 3, which is the middle position, down to the bottom position, which is, for me, it's position 5, but it doesn't seem like I'm going to be able to do that, but let's see where we get to. Right. So the challenge I'm having is it's still resting on the top of that panhard mount, and the whole point of making everything wider was to go around that mount. Now, trying to work out if it's the rails have bent more on one side than the other. Right, that's a simple one. So I'm not sure the 4-link mounts are perfectly equal, or one of my bolts is in the wrong place. So what am I going to do? I think I'm going to tighten a link on one side and see if that pulls the whole thing across. Yeah, it just feels like it's not set up right, and that's because one of my upper links is too long or too short. Yeah, so these lower links, they're both going off in that direction, which means one of these upper links is in the wrong length. So what I'm going to do is have the whole thing upside down and try and work on it this way, because I think if it was further across, then we would get much lower, much lower. Right, so to correct, what do we need to do? Or do we just need to make that wider? So I'm just correcting the geometry of the 4-link. Just trying to see if putting an extra standoff in would actually help. It looks like it might, but it also might interfere once I get that 4-link starting to slam a bit better. So I'm going to, I think I'm going to try and lengthen the one on the right hand side of the truck first. I tend to prefer to lengthen links and shorten links because it gives you that extra bit. Oh wow, great, someone's going to upload another servo on axle to Cults 3D. That will be awesome. I will be absolutely happy to print my own and test that out. Yeah, so I'm just trying to correct my 4-link. Yeah, if you've made a servo on axle for people to use, I can highly recommend trying to avoid using the panhard link to mount to brace against, because if you didn't do that, then I would be able to run my truck a lot more slammed than it is. Yeah, I think I think I need to adjust my links, but before I adjust my links, I'm going to try and get another standoff in there. So I'm going to have to pick up all the spacers that were just thrown over my bench and try and squeeze. So I've put a standoff at the top, one at the top of each of the shock towers, but then where my suspension is, the rails are closing in, and I'm just going to try and open those up so that there's a 80mm wide box so that the rails can go down the side of the panhard mount. Oh, what brand of 3D printer is good? How much do you want to spend? If you've got loads of money, a HP sintered laser, selective laser sintering is fantastic, but they're a couple of $100,000. For a hobbyist, Creality have got a sale on, so you can get an Ender 5 or a CR10 quite cheap at the moment. They've done a pre-Black Friday sale. A lot of people like the Prusa, but there's a long lead time on them and they are quite expensive, so you would have to commit to buying them. I very nearly bought one, but then kind of backed out on there. Yeah, I think the main ones for hobbyists, from the research that I did, and anyone that's got a 3D printer, please speak up in the chat, but the main ones for hobbyists are the Ender, then there's a Mega S. I can't remember who does that. I think it's any print, any something, and yeah, they're the two main ones. Monoprice make good ones, but I don't think there's a huge community behind them. The Ender is the one that most people have, and they 3D print upgrades and things for them, so you can knock yourself out with all the upgrades and everything that you can get for them. Right, I'm going to have to, unfortunately, undo these suspension bolts slightly so I can prise the frame open a bit and get this standoff in there. It's a bit awkward, but we'll make it happen. Right. Right, we're going to need 2 small bolts. And I will get one in and then try and somehow manhandle this frame so I can get the other one in. Right, so I'm about 2 or 3 mil out. And of course I've just done up all the bolts, so it's really hard to pull the frame rails apart. So off we go. Undo these ones and then we'll do them all back tight again. Right, I should be able to. I'm pulling the frame rails apart. I need to get them about 1 mil wider than the standoff, but of course the skid is only 70 mil wide, so it's really quite taxing to get it to separate enough to get that standoff in and do it on camera and not swear if I catch my fingers. Oh, right. Right, I've got the standoff between the frame rails. It's just not where I want it between the frame rails. But we are very close. Yeah, great. I'm going to find the smallest hex driver I can to try and wiggle that hole into position. Great. Okay, so I've got that extra standoff in, and hopefully yeah, where that standoff is, it's just stopping my links from going all the way flat, but it's not a million miles off. So we are going to get this thing super slammed tonight, which is going to be epic. So get these standoffs together. and then let's focus on doing the rest. I'll hold this up to the camera as soon as I've got these bolts back together. So yeah, what am I doing? Right. Great, we're getting there, getting there. So the reason for all this bracing is when you roll the truck, you don't want to bend the rails more than you need to, or at all. So what I've done, hopefully this comes up on camera, there's built-in suspension shock towers. So I've put a brace at the top of where I do my shocks, so the bolts for my shocks go into there. I've also put a brace below, in front and behind where the servo goes into the chassis, to create that 80mm wide box for the mounts to go in. And then I need to get my 4-link lengths right so that they go up and down inside. And then I think we are going to be at the point, yeah, I think in reality I'm not going to get as slammed as I want, so I'm going to change the link mounts to be down to number 4, but that does mean a 5mm drop across the whole chassis, 7.5mm drop across the whole chassis, which is great. And then I've got to sort out a steering link, so I'll just get my suspension ones done, because they are probably the last ones I will remember to do up at the end. Right, so plenty of movement in the shocks, that's great. So I'm going to flip this over, and what I'm doing is I've got my 4-link arms like that, but one of them is a bit longer than the other, so it's moved my 4-link over to one side. So I'm just going to try and get that adjusted. And what I need to do is get this bolt in, get the spacers on, and then just try and see where it sits now. Now it might be that now I've put those that extra standoff on, that it's tidied itself up, so we'll just have to see. Yeah, so that one needs to be longer. Which is fine. And essentially, because I don't know if people have watched this on the catch-up or not, because we made our top links out of just rod, just threaded rod, I made them long enough that I can just adjust them a bit to try and compensate for this. Yeah, we're getting there. Yeah, that's great. So I think the angle that it goes in will dictate it quite a bit, because it's on a countersunk screw, so that gives me some adjustments as well. So I'm just getting the nylock on, gonna tighten that up, and then hope that I get this just right. Let's have a look. Ah, the bolt that I've used is a bit too long on the drive shaft side, and it's just nudging the drive shaft, which is causing it to move across. So I'm going to find a slightly shorter bolt. Try not to lose it inside my gearbox to use for that application, and that might be the problem that we're having. I'm also going to just tighten this one up properly. There we go. Yeah, so the drive shaft hitting that bolt would have locked up at that point. That would have been quite disastrous. So we're going to try and put a shorter bolt in there, which is going to be irritating with these spacers, so bear with me. If you've got any questions, chuck them in the chat. Appreciate you watching. More videos coming soon. I try to assume that people drop in and out of the live streams or do what I do and skip about quite a bit until they find the bit that they want, but then you lose a bit of context. So yeah. Right, there we go. Got that in, got those in. Off we go. Right, that isn't going to hit our drive shaft now, which also isn't going to actuate our suspension or push our suspension off. Yeah, that's cool. Although it may be slightly too short for that nylock bolt, so we'll find out. Right. Yeah, now we're getting somewhere. So it's not quite across as much as I want it to be, but I think I can adjust that by changing this side. Great. So do we go straight up and down? We do. We do. And now, yeah, now we're not able to go all the way down, but we are now considerably further down than we started. So I'm going to, yeah, I'm not going to worry about it. If it sits on that as a bump stop, it sits on that as a bump stop. It will still get full articulation either way. So I'm going to drop these rear links and see if I have any skid angle. I may or may not, so now it's time to check the skid angle. Then we'll do the wheel wideners. And then I'm probably going to go inside for a beer. I just realised I said I was going to do the springs as well, so I am going to get those springs done. So now that's off and that's off. We'll grab our springs and swap the springs over. Do I need them? No, this thing's not tipped back for a while, so don't think I need the super stiff springs. And actually I've taken weight off the front, so yeah, it definitely doesn't need super stiff springs because there's less weight to transfer to the rear. There's the whole weight of that servo, which I imagine is about 150 grams because it is not a light servo. So where are we at? Yeah, we've got to hook up a drag link of some description. But for now, let's see how much slam this has got. Right. Previously, I could get my hand under it and my knuckle would just about touch it. Now I can just get my finger up to the sort of cuticle, so I can just get the tip of my finger under it. So we've gone down considerably. Now I'm gonna, yeah, pinion angle's great on the back, pinion angle's a little bit tipped on the rear. I'm going to lift the truck up and just see if the skid's still angled. Yep, the skid is still angled. So we can now reach much more crazy degrees of articulation. Yeah, when it's at full extension, I can get like 3 fingers under it. So the full articulation's about that size. So I'll measure that on a ruler. Yeah, we've got about 2.5 inches of upward and downward articulation, or in my money that is 65 mil, which is pretty similar to a standard Traxxas. Yeah, that's cool. That has got it a lot lower. I'll have more direct steering. Just gonna see. Yeah, that's fine. Right, now it's time to look at steering drag links, because this changes. So my previous drag link is like bent and twisted and shaved and all sorts. So it's probably not going to work too well on here. But what I'm going to look at is whether that bent drag link will still be viable. So what I'm going to do is just pop it on the front, just with a temporary mount. Or I'm not, because this bolt's covered in Loctite. Just going to pop it on the front with a temporary mount, and we'll see where it goes. Okay, cool. And then that was our drag. So when that's super low, yeah, my drag link is just going to catch when it's super low. But to be fair, it's resting on the pan hard anyway, so it's not like it's going to be going anywhere in a rush. So I'm doing my standard thing of, if it's in the way, cut it off. If it breaks, replace it. So don't be afraid to clearance things out and chop pieces off links. Yeah, so it hits the suspension ever so slightly. But I don't care. We are super low. Stupidly low, actually. And it's still got a good rake on the skid. Like a really good rake on the skid. It looks like without that weight, the springs are just holding it off that axle anyway, so that's great. Yeah. Just want to make sure everything's still straight enough. yeah, I think we're good. I think we are really, really good. Cool. So I will get a decent volt in that steering. I'll grab a battery soon and we'll test it with a battery. And yeah, we will, what will we do now? Oh yeah, wheel extensions, and then I think we're done. So yeah, drive it around the table and go off for a beer. Let's see, is that the right length? No, next one. Just got to find the bolt that I used previously. There's the one. Get a fresh doodad. Now ideally I would swap out this worn out linkage rod end, but I'm not too bothered. I'm going to get much better steering than I had previously, so it's not worth the hassle. Now this is going to be an awkward one to install. So what I'm doing is holding the nylock nut with some pliers. And just do it up that way. Do it the old-fashioned way. Try not to drop the pliers. Makes it harder. Yeah, great. Okay, cool. So, panhard removed, 4-link installed. We are now servo on axle with a 4-link. That's taken longer than I thought, but that's because I wanted to slam the suspension. We now have a super low crawler. So let's do those hex extenders. These are the cheapest ones I could get off eBay because I wasn't really bothered about how good they were, because I am going to 3D print some plastic wheels to get super lightweight wheels, and when I do that I'll be printing offset hubs, so I won't need the wheel extenders. And in fact what I'm going to be printing is super wide wheels, so I can have a wheel that's offset, negative offset, so it's increasing the track width, but also really wide wheels as well, so it kind of hides the hubs. It'll mean the tyres aren't as tall, but they'll have a wider contact patch. And with these Louise Rowdies, when you don't throw the wheel nuts everywhere, with these Louise Rowdies, they're a 50mm wide tyre, so the wider the wheel, the better. Don't know where that wheel nut went. Hopefully, oh yeah, there we go. Do know where that went. So I'm going to pop this on a stand and get these wheel wideners on. So the great thing about swapping your hexes over is you take out the little pin, wiggle off the old hex, get the widener, bung that on, make sure you get the thread side for the thread, and of course they use a completely different hex key to go back on. Chuck a load of Loctite on it if you don't want it to come off, because with a wheel widener, unlike your normal hexes, your wheel hub won't be going over them and holding them in place. And these seem to have a crap thread on them, so they don't want to go back in, and that's why buying cheap means that you sometimes buy twice. So I'm going to check this thread and just make sure it will actually go on. Yeah, that's just a really bad thread. Really bad thread. Right, I'll make sure that goes nice and tight so it doesn't come off. Right, that is what I expected. That is a 8mm wide extender, so that gives me about 4mm of track width. Oh no, they're 10mm. Great. They come with a weird spring washer thing and a different style of wheel nut. So I'm going to test those out now. So we get our front wheels on. I'm going to do it up manually just to make sure. Cool. Okay, that was simple enough. I will repeat that process. Get the old hex off, swap things over. Get the new ones, get those doodads. There we go. Right, so I think I've said it a few times, but I'll just recap. The reason why I'm going with track extenders is I want to make sure that with widening the front of the truck that I don't start bouncing the wheels off the front of the truck. So just trying to find the least chewed up tread. So I put things back properly. Yeah, they're looking good. Right, just turn those up. So these come with like a wheel nut that's not a, well, it's not a traditional nut. It's like an inverse bolt. And what that does is it allows you to have that extra length without having to swap your axles. Now, a lot of people buy the longer axles, and that's fine, but I don't trust the Traxxas axles. I have snapped them on a stock Sport. So I prefer the GPM spring steel axles. Which I didn't want to invest and wait and get new versions of, which is why I got extenders that I wasn't sure about instead, that had that cap system. There we go, bit too much Loctite on that one, so get that done. We are rocking. So we've gone servo on axle, an extra 12mm on the track, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's 1/10 scale, so you're adding 120 centimeters to the track width, which is phenomenally huge if you did that on your car. This one's not wanting to screw in, so oh yeah, they've sent some remarkably low quality pins. but the harder they are to screw together, the harder they are to remove, and hopefully, with any luck, the harder they are for them to self-extract themselves. Although in this case, this one doesn't want to install in the first place. I thought I'd put all my MIP bits in the same place. There we go. Turn this back down, so I used it a bit high. Ooh. That really isn't wanting to go in. This will be a big disappointment if just one won't go on. Although I suppose I could run a wider track width on the front than the rear. That would be quite cool. Oh, that's made a mess, right. Try and force it into the non-threaded side. Not recommended, but this is a needs must scenario. I'm going to put the truck on the floor, on the desk, to try and get a bit more pressure into that scenario. Well, that's going to require cutting off when that needs to come off, but that'll do. While I'm in here, I may as well get the other one done and then just bosh the wheels back on. Let's turn you round. Great, that's that off. Try and find the thread. That's the thread. Get some Loctite on. I mean, if I was a patient person, I could have ordered the right size pins off eBay, and that would have sorted that problem out. Or I could have filed down a grub screw. Great, so get the wheels on. Get the funny washer thing that they come with on. Get that on. And tighten that and give it a whiz. Right, that has gone on nice and snug. Although I've just realised I've got the tread the wrong way round, so it's got to come off again. I run these Louise Rowdies in 2 different directions. So, yeah. Right. Just checking for any looseness on that bolt. Just making sure they're nice and snug. There we go, right. Cool. One super low crawler that's just had a load of weight locked off the front, which is great. I mean, the front now it feels like my springs are the wrong way round, and in fact I am going to do the rear springs because then they're perfectly balanced across the length of it. And yeah, we are sitting a lot lower, a lot lower. That's incredible. That's incredible. Yeah, with the weight of a shell and a battery on there, that's going to be perfect. So let's get these rear shocks switched over. And then I'll grab a battery and we'll have a little play. Yeah, the initial aim was to try and get it as low as possible, but what I've got is actually a better compromise. It's 5 to 10 mil lower than it was, but instead of driving along on the bump stops, it's now running a sprung suspension, so it has an amount of upward travel, which I think is, for me, the perfect compromise, because I do like that little bit of upward travel to stop the body unsettling as you're doing complicated side hills or complicated climbs where the front needs to articulate. And if you're running a kind of on the bump stops low as possible, you know, 80-degree climb kind of truck, you then do get knocked about a little bit in some of those more complicated scenarios. So yeah, we are rocking. And the weight of the extra link is less than the weight of the panhard rod and panhard mount. So we've also saved probably, I don't know, 50-60 grams. And then we've taken the brass hexes off and replaced them with wider aluminium ones. So we've saved some more. So we've probably knocked somewhere in the region of about 70 to 100 grams off the truck, which, given it weighed 2.7 kilos, is 8% on tired. It's a reasonable chunk off the truck, you know. And as far as free mods go, I think that's pretty cool in itself. It's always good to remove as much weight as possible, including low down weight. I mean, people say don't remove low down weight, but I think they're nuts. Might even change the shock oil on the front in another video, because 2.5 hours is enough for me. But the reason for that is the front running 25 weight, because it had the weight of the servo and it has the battery and everything leaning on it, but it doesn't have that anymore, so probably doesn't need to be 25 at the front, 20 at the back. Bearing in mind that's Proline big bores, which are a wider bore and a bled shock, not an emulsion shock, a diaphragm shock, not an emulsion shock. So therefore that's equivalent to like a 35 and 30 on another truck. Yeah, that is cool. That's cool. I am happy now. Right, let's grab a battery, which is in my bag over here somewhere. Right, get a lid back on my Loctite. I'm going to leave most of the crap on this desk. Hopefully you can see my workshop stand. Let's turn it on and have a play. Right. So, I'm going to turn everything on. I'm going to go and I'm going to reverse my servo. I'm not going to reverse my servo. That's weird. Oh yes, no, that's right, yeah, because it's on a servo and axle. Okay, great. We are going to have to set some endpoints, but let's have a little crawl. I'm just going to pick it up for now because, you know, whatever. So first test of the servo on axle, climb up the workshop stand. Well, that was dead easy. I'm not sure the camera captures it. The amount of flex I've got now has gone up, so we'll pop it on there. Yeah, that's it in its flexed position. So it's on top of a workshop stand. The workshop stand is about the same height as a tyre, almost. So it's a flexy monster now. That steering's pretty awesome. So I'm going to try and drive it. I'm going to have to hold this. I mean, it's not a grippy surface, it's not an easy surface to climb. Yeah, that's cool. Right, just going to test it driving just straight up and over the workshop stand. Thing is, it's so wide now, I'm not sure it does. It will fit. Yeah, let's try something else. Let's try our box for our Dremel. Hopefully I can get it to close. Cables and things in the way. Right, box for our Dremel. Straight up. Now it's not necessarily climbing up. I knew it would just climb up something that's taller than the tyres. It's not a surprise to me. For me, what's interesting will be whether it can break over this. Now it will probably make a mess of my laptop and everything else. So we're trying to break over a box that is 3.5 inches tall and 7 inches deep. So that's quite tall, and what I'm going to see is whether it gets hung up or whether it's now got enough articulation so the belly's got a bit hung up, but I can use the servo to drag it slightly forward, and now I'm completely hung up. So that box is big enough to be a stand for it. But yeah, if I do it at an angle, let's have a look. That's yeah, I definitely need to set the end points to get the steering back. Yeah, out in the real world I could give that a tiny bit of power and that would be fine. Can't do it here because my laptop's just there and that would smash into it. What I'm going to do now is pick up my workshop stand and just set the endpoints for the steering. If you've never set your endpoints before, find a relatively quiet room like I've got. Go to your endpoints. In my case it's called travel. Just got to find it. There we go. And I'm going to go into the modification mode. And I can hear the servos straining. So I've just turned down the travel until the servo stops making a racket when I turn full turn. And when the servo stops making a racket, just take it down 2. I'm turning to the left, adding some travel in there. It's just starting to creak. And okay, great. So we have got loads of left travel, loads of right travel. I'm actually probably going to put a bend in my steering rod at some point, because it's just catching on the diff, and I think there's probably another couple of degrees in there that I could get. That steering is super accurate. I mean, I'm used to panhard rods, and the body and the shocks are hardly bouncing about at all. It's not off to one side. It's awesome. Yeah, at the extremes of steering, there's a slight bit of body twist, but that's because the rear wheels aren't turning. I'm over the moon. I want to take it out and go and have a play with it, but it's too dark now. Yeah, I'm going to put my hand under to see what the clearance is like. Yeah, so it's that's weird. Yeah, it's lost a tiny bit of the overall articulation, but that's good, because I'd actually taken the pen spring mod out of it and gained some articulation. So what I've managed to do is take the pen spring mod out, get back to a better degree of articulation as I had before I took it out for the last video, but also get it onto a 4-link, get it back to sprung, so it now has stiffer springs in the rear, and just overall just feels super exciting for next time. My internet's starting to crap out because of the amount of uploading that we've done. If you've watched a whole lot of this, thank you very much. It was really great to talk to the people who were talking in the chat. If you didn't put anything in the chat, chuck something in the comments. Really like to talk to you. Hope you like the new lighting. It might have been a bit dark with the black mats out, but hopefully it's all right with the normal one. I'll try and change that slightly. I'll bump up the brightness next time. That is a Scattergun, which is custom rails for TRX4 converted to servo over axle, which takes all the weight of the servo and chucks it onto the axle. When I'm at maximum articulation, my hubs are my diff covers are straight up and down, so I'm pretty confident I've got my pinion angles correct. The truck, just with that extra little bit of spring not sat on the bump stops, just feels fantastic. I'm so looking forward to taking this out. So on that note, I'm going to go in, I'm not sure if I'm going to have a cup of tea or a beer, but either way I'm going to go and relax. Thank you for watching and catch you next time.